Hello, I am Sydney and this is Sam. We are both PhD students at Seattle Pacific University working on our degrees in clinical psychology. We are here today to talk to you about Wise Mind. And our goal with these skills videos is to both give kind of newly minted therapists and trainees the chance to learn these skills before fully diving into their practice. Because we feel like this would have been really, really useful for us in our training. And then also I want for these to be a way for folks that might not have the resources for traditional DBT to have access to these skills. So I thank you, Sam, so much for being here. We are going to start with a Wise Mind mindfulness practice to really get us in the spirit of Wise Mind and orient us to what we're doing today. So what I have noticed as we are over a year into the pandemic, and as Sam and I right now are mid-quarter at school, which is always a hectic time, that I've been feeling a little scattered and frazzled. So this practice that we're going to do today is going to help us find our center and really ground even amidst all of the chaos that we're going through. So Sam, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and assume your mindful position. That often looks like shoulders back, feet planted firmly on the floor. You can rest your palms up or down on your knees, and you're welcome to either keep your eyes open and gently gazing ahead of you or close your eyes. So I'll ask you to take a moment to settle yourself into a comfortable and meditative position. Breathe in and out, drawing your conscious attention to your breath as it fills and leaves your lungs. Allow your attention to shift toward your center, settling yourself into the bottom of each breath. Now focus your mindful awareness toward the center of your forehead, or your third eye. As you settle into the top of each breath. Notice how you can consciously control your attention as you focus on the top and bottom of each breath. I'm going to have you stick with this practice for a few more breaths. I'm going to be quiet to give you space to do this. All right, when you are ready, you can wiggle your fingers and toes and then gently open your eyes. Sam, I would love to hear, what changes did you notice as you found your center?
I noticed a general feeling of being a little bit more balanced. I felt a little bit lighter. I also noticed some muscle tension reduction, especially in my shoulders.
Where we hold all of our stress.
Yes. And I also feel like my mind is just a bit more clear and focused.
I love that. Great noticing your experience, Sam. And that last little bit, right, of being able to have a little more clarity is one of our main goals with the mindful or a wise mind practice. Love that you experienced that. So we're going to move into a very brief didactic or teaching lesson on wise minds. I want to orient you first to the DBT Skills Workbook if you have it. You can either find this online, you can purchase it, you can Google Marsha Linehan DBT Skills Manual. If you don't have it, it should pop up. It's typically free to the public. And we are going to be in Mindfulness Handout 3. So I'll give you a moment to get there, and then we will talk wise mind. So, you know, as you're getting to this handout, I just want you to notice that humans tend to have 3 states of mind. We have emotion minds, logic or reasonable minds, and we have wise mind. And the skill of wise mind, or being able to find your center, is foundational to every other skill that we will talk about moving forward. Because if we don't know which state of mind that we are in, it is really, really hard to proceed in a way that honors all of who we are. It's hard to be effective if we are not centered. So let's talk first about logic mind or reasonable mind. I prefer the term logic mind because I think reasonable mind is a little values laden. And logic really captures what this part of us is. And so when I speak to logic mind, we're talking the facts. We are talking kind of the rational part of you, that part of you that is very task oriented. I don't know about you. I love checking things off my list. I love making lists. That's very logic minded. And when I think of logic mind, I really like to think of Spock or Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, because these are folks, right, who are very, very grounded in their logic, and they make their decisions from this space of logic. Sam, do you have any other examples of logic mind, or I'll just leave it there.
Also, for my Star Trek fans out there, Data is a great example of logic mind.
Mm-hmm. Sam and I were talking about this before this video, and I had no idea who Data was, but for the Trekkies out there, that is apparently a great example. Perfect. And I just want to ask you briefly, Sam, what do you think happens if you spend your whole entire life in logic mind?
Well, you are going to be missing some really important information that your emotions are trying to tell you. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to be honoring those feelings as they come up. And you could even be avoiding or suppressing some of those important emotions.
Yeah. I will say it's really, really hard to have a romantic relationship if you get stuck in logic mind, right? Really hard to connect because emotions is often what brings us together. Good. So let's shift to emotion mind. Emotion mind, right, is when we are controlled or our actions are dictated by the emotions that we are feeling. This is a space where we might act in ways that are really mood dependent. We might find ourselves, for example, if we are kind of controlled by anxiety, find ourselves ruminating on all of those little anxious thoughts. Oftentimes when I think of an example of emotion mind, I think of like a toddler throwing a tantrum or an adult throwing a tantrum. I think we've all seen that happen too. Sam, do you have any examples of what emotion mind looks like to you?
First example that comes to mind is way back in undergrad when I worked as a barista. I did see an adult have a little bit of a emotional tantrum about her drink not quite meeting expectations.
I just need to say I was also a barista for years and years. I didn't know we had this connection. And that sums it up very, very well. Having a meltdown about your coffee not being the way that you would like it to be. Spot on. Good. And what do we think happens, Sam, if we spend all of our time in emotion mind?
Well, first of all, it's going to be really exhausting. Also, just like if we spend all of our time in logic mind, there's going to be important facts that we're missing out on if we're always in emotion mind.
Yeah.
And this might even start to impact our relationships with others. And it might lead us to act impulsively and do things we regret.
Mm-hmm. I think you were spot on, right? And we'll notice getting pulled to either extreme, either always in logic mind or always in emotion mind, has consequences. I think there's also a time and place to trend one way or another. For example, Sam and I as students, we do a lot of our learning more in logic mind, right? That's a good space to hit the books. And then emotion mind, right? We can have really strong emotions and have them in a way that isn't necessarily emotion mind. For example, when we're in love, right? That can be a very, very powerful, positive place to sit in. Or on the other end, if we have a loved one die, that grief, that sadness might be really, really, really strong, but we might not necessarily be in emotion mind or be controlled by that so long as, right, we are kind of honoring where we're at and acting in ways that are consistent with our values. Which brings us to wise mind, right? This is the space where we are in line with our values. It is our inner wisdom and it is synthesis. And notice I don't say compromise. So we have logic mind, we have emotion minds. Compromising might look like, I want to go to the zoo and my partner wants to go to a water park. We spend half the day at each place, right? That's compromise. Sometimes that might work and sometimes that might be wise minded. But more often than not, we can think of wise mind as being a synthesis in that it's more like a teeter totter or a seesaw. I don't know if you guys ever played on those when you were little, but if you imagine, like my dad used to take me to the park. You put little 6-year-old Sydney on a teeter totter on one end, and then you put my dad on the other end. If we sit in the same spot, like equidistant from each other, we're not going anywhere, right? Or more like this, I'm going to fly and my dad is going to be down here the whole time. And so we have to shift to be able to find a center that works for both of us, right? So he might have to scoot in like all the way for us to be able to do a little bit of this and really be centered. So Sam, I think I'll open this up to you. How do you know when you're in wise mind?
For me, when I'm in wise mind, I feel like I am able to look at all of the facts in front of me. And I feel like I'm able to notice my emotions and my own preferences and be able to look at both equally and not be weighting one more heavily than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Also, physically, I feel very open, a little bit centered, a little bit calm, balanced. Those are all words that come to mind.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're incorporating all the different parts of our experience too. Like part of this is cognitive and part of this is physical. Like we know when we are not acting in a way that is wise mind, right? It's that moment when I get mad at my little brother and go like steal a sweatshirt and I just feel an urge to like go and you're like ah, and then you come back and you're like, oh, this probably wasn't a great idea because now everyone's going to be upset, right? You can feel that in your body, and I think it's important to notice all of the aspects of our experience. So let's talk about how to practice wise mind. We've done it already in the little mindfulness practice that we did at the beginning. And you'll notice in your binder or in your skills handouts, on handout 3A, there are a lot of different ideas for practicing wise mind in a way that is more mindfulness based. And I really like these practices, especially if we are caught up in emotion mind. Doing a practice like this really helps us come down and just helps us settle a little bit so that we can then move forward in a way that is values consistent. Another way in which to practice wise mind is an exercise that is a little bit more cognitive. And so I'm going to share something with you, and Sam and I are going to walk through briefly how we might do a more written version of wise mind to find synthesis. So let me share my screen. Can you see that okay, Sam?
Yes.
All right. In about a sentence or two, or maybe 30 seconds, whatever time you need, do you mind describing the situation that we are going to be talking about today?
Yeah. So, as Sydney said earlier, we are students at Seattle Pacific.
Mhm.
And a little while ago, it came to light that there are some really homophobic policies that are in place at SPU. And this deeply goes against both Sydney and I's values. And this was really, really upsetting. And so I noticed immediately I was in emotion mind when I heard about this.
And can you describe that emotion mind? What did you notice, Sam?
Oh, I felt so angry and sad.
Let's pause on
And
that anger bit, Sam.
yes,
How did you experience that anger? And I had a similar reaction here. How did you experience that in your body?
I felt really physically hot and
Mhm.
tense.
Good. And what sort of thoughts might have gone through your mind as you're noticing that anger?
My first thought was, that's it. I'm leaving. I'm finding a new school. I'm gone.
Hmm. Excellent. Good. And so it sounds like your urges then, the thing that you wanted to do was get out of here, quit
Absolutely.
school. And just to give you all a little bit of background, when you're in a PhD program and a PhD program at SPU specifically, it's hard to leave, right? We'll get to this on the facts, but maybe why did you not act on that right away, Sam?
Well, first of all, the specific lab that I'm in is
Mm-hmm.
lovely and affirming, and
Mm.
I love my lab.
I'm gonna put that. This is like right, your protective emotion going
Hmm.
on here, right? Love
Hmm.
for a lab, and just to validate that, that's one of the things that's kept me sane through this too. Okay. Um, so let's stay here. You had urges to quit school, thoughts of like, I'm gone. We're done with this. You got the anger, and you said sadness too, right?
Hmm.
How did you feel that?
I felt kind of this heavy pit in my stomach.
Hmm.
I definitely did some crying about
Hmm.
this.
Hmm. Yeah, me too. In lab, actually.
Yes.
Hmm. Good. And what kind of thoughts did you have?
Just that this is so awful, and I am so ashamed to be affiliated with a place that has these values.
Yes. Okay. How about urges? What did your sadness want you to do?
I just wanted to stay under my fuzzy blanket with my
Hmm.
dog and cry.
Yes. Lovely. Excellent job capturing your experience here. Okay. And I'm sure there's a lot more we could put under here, but what I really want us to be noticing is that had we acted, for example, on this anger right away, we would have just quit, right? And had we stuck with our sadness and only honored our sadness, Sam wouldn't be here right now because she would still be under her blanket. Let's shift over to logic mind. From a more logic, like just looking at facts and not honoring everything over here, What did you notice? What are the facts of the situation?
Let's see. One of the facts that I was considering was that, like Sydney had mentioned, it's nearly impossible to switch PhD programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about how maybe I could completely start over somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
and um, what that would mean for all of the years of work that I've already put in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, other facts,
I'm gonna write down,
the
right? Because
cost.
we have a financial burden coming from SPU, and for us to just leave, right? Then we have all of these student loans. That what do we have to show for those? Good.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if I just leave SPU, then I there isn't an opportunity for me to try and create change there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a fact, right? That you can't change an institution if you are no longer a part of that institution, or it makes it a lot more difficult. Good. I think this is really good. For the sake of time, I might shift us to wise mind. But perfect, right? So we're noticing just straight up logic. And notice too, where if we rolled with like just knowing that it'd be impossible to move to a different place, and we're just like, well, okay, I'm here, and put our heads down and finish the program. Notice that that is not at all accounting for the anger and the sadness and in our values here too. And maybe that's just one little thing to touch on. Like, Sam, what are your values here?
Well, as a member of the LGBTQ community myself, I am very dedicated to creating safe and affirming places,
Mm-hmm.
and showing equity and love to all people.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say equity too. Okay, excellent. And what if we are coming at this from a position where we want to figure out what we're going to do next, figure out how to proceed in a way that is effective and within our wise mind? What do you think? How do we take the different aspects here, the things that are really important, and come up with a plan to move forward?
So, what I have been doing is honoring my anger and sadness and holding that fact that I can't make changes to this institution if I leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been using that to um, help advocate for
Mm-hmm.
real systemic change.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also used this synthesis of emotion and logic to come up with my dissertation that would serve the LGBTQ community.
I I love that. Sam, I am just like, I didn't know that. And I am inspired. And I am just noticing, yeah, we can have the anger and we can have the sadness, right? These are super effective right here. They're motivating you to advocate for this change and do a whole dissertation here, right? Um, I love it. So we're noticing the emotions, we're honoring those emotions, and at the same time, right, we are staying to honor kind of our both financial time, X, Y, and Z commitments, and doing it in a way that's truly empowering. So Sam, thank you for your vulnerability here. This is a perfect example for how we apply wise mind to really, really challenging decisions, right? Any reflections that you have after going through this practice?
I think something to point out is that in going through this practice, it might look like I got to wise minds like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to validate that it takes a little bit of time and a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely spent a little bit of time in emotion mind first.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I just wanted to point out the time and effort that it does take to center yourself into wise mind.
I think that's a really important point. And notice that we can be in emotion mind. And it's not that all is lost once we enter emotion mind, right? It's a really good place for us to notice where we're at and then shift and do what's needed to find that wise mind. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And let's wrap up and talk about how to implement wise mind in our daily lives. Like Sam was saying, it's not easy. And especially emotion mind sometimes likes to disguise itself as logic mind. And so our first goal when we're talking about wise mind and trying to implement is just bringing awareness to our experience and really checking in with where we're at. And so my goal for you all, and what Sam and I are going to do this week as well, is to check in with yourself regularly. And sometimes I'll say this to clients when I'm working with folks, and they're like, okay, got it. And they know me, right? And Sam, you're going to learn this about me real quick. I'm like, yeah, no, we need a much stronger plan than that. And so Sam and I are going to grab our phones real quick and go to our calendar apps or our reminder apps, whatever you do to keep yourself on schedule. And I'd like for you to set a reminder for noon every single day this week. And I want you to title it Wise Mind. And my goal for you, and you can add a little bit of this in the notes, is at noon every single day to check in and ask, do I feel centered right now? And in my description, I'm just going to write like one, centered. And then I want you to ask, how is my logic mind showing up right now? So 2, logic mind. And then 3, how is emotion mind showing up right now? Or how am I experiencing my emotions? And then the most important one is the number 4, and it's, what do I need to find my center? I'm typing that whole thing out. Okay. And then do what you need to put the proper repeats on, and get that into your calendar. And when that alarm goes off at noon, and if noon doesn't work for you, that's fine. You can shift the time. But I want you to ask yourself those questions. And if you're finding that you are pulled to either logic mind or emotion mind, then feel free to engage with either the mindfulness practice at the beginning of this video, or write out your columns. Logic mind, emotion mind, wise mind. We do this, right? We practice these skills on the regular, and this is your way, being very deliberate about implementation right off the bat, right? It won't always be this effortful. Our goal is for these skills to become effortless, to be honest, where you're just living in a way that is skillful because you are so well rehearsed. This is how we get that practice. We're starting with 5-pound dumbbells, and eventually we're going to work our way up to 50-pound dumbbells or something similar. For me, it's like 20, but it's fine. Okay. Thank you so much for being here, Sam. Very much appreciate you, appreciate your vulnerability, and appreciate the work that you're doing in response to this SPU policy. And yeah, please let me know all if you have feedback on this video. Look forward to hearing how your practice goes.